Welcome to this week's Real Talk with Jill and Tia. And as you can see, Jill is here. Tia is out at Supply Side West. So if you're there, make sure you give her a shout out. But we have Bryan. I have to get my angles right. Bryan, our special guest. We're so happy to have you with us today.
Thank you. Yep, not Tia. Not as easy to look at as Tia, that's for sure.
Ah, that's so kind of you. But I love having you on because like your show was part of what first inspired us to go live. And I know you're on some crazy number episode, like 200.
201 this weekend.
201. We're still far behind. This is episode 124. So, but you kind of paved the way to say like we need some different communication places to come together as a food safety community, or ours is more like some leadership, but food involved. And thank you for inspiring us.
Oh, no, you're welcome. And a good way to think about this is I saw a stat on this recently where the average podcast lasts 6 episodes. So if you make it past 6, you're in the top tier.
Dang, high-fiving us.
Yes, absolutely.
And to our audience, because this wouldn't be possible if nobody showed up, then we would have stopped this a long time ago. But Elena, thank you for being here with us from Colorado. You're here. Our audience here is what makes it fun. Like when they pop in and do it today. Share in the comments. Drop where you're from. Drop what it's like. That's what we love. This is part of the conversation. And yes, we get that it's in this format. It's more communication back and forth through text. But you know what? Communication's communication. Learning together is learning together.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I should get off the soapbox. So, Bryan, thank you for being here. We've got a big topic that we're talking about today.
Oh, God, yes.
Right?
Very
Persuasion.
much.
Persuasion, I think sometimes gets a bad rap because you're like, ugh, do I really want to persuade people? Do I have to persuade people?
Yeah, a lot of people, Jill, think that persuasion means tricking people or doing something. You think of the used car salesman, right? Hey, Jill, what's it going to take to get you in a car today? No.
I'm glad you went into food instead of sales.
Yeah. Definitely. I don't have that skill set for sure. But that's kind of part of the lesson too, right? Is that it's a learned skill set. A lot of people think that persuasion and people are just born with it. The fancy sales guy in his nice suit, and that they just have that gift. And it's a learned skill, just like everything else.
It is. That's why I'm glad today we're going to talk all about it, because there's been a lot happening in our industry, and there are a lot of places that we can talk about, like, where does persuasion come in? How does it help us reach goals? How does it help us have better impact? How does it help us enable business growth? Because companies hire us to do that. Like, we're not just here to be the gatekeepers of documents and whatever else. We are here to help enable business growth while doing our mission of safe food.
Yeah, well, and I mean, that's a good point, Jill, because even your persuasion starts at the interview. You are persuading that company that you're the right person for that fit. You're selling yourself. You're persuading them that it's a good match. And if you're doing the interview correctly, you're also making sure that they're the right fit for you.
Absolutely. Well, before we dive all the way in, I want to let people know that if it's your first time joining us, welcome. We're so glad to have you here for today's episode. If you're catching us on replay, you know the drill. Drop in #replay, because that way we can follow along and answer any questions or comments that you have. But here at Catalyst, we are on a mission to transform how people lead in food, because we are in the camp of, we are sick of hearing people talk about being burnt out, overwhelmed, challenged, frustrated. Like, we're doing it just because it helps us like have a roof over our head. As humans, we are here to have enjoyable lives. But that starts with how we lead and how we show up for others. And so it is our responsibility as leaders to set people up for success. Doesn't mean every day is a walk in the park, but it does mean our overarching state of being is with ease, flow, happiness, joy, supporting each other and ourselves. And that's what we do at Catalyst, help people tap into that.
Right, absolutely. And it's an important part, and I'm glad you brought that up too, Jill, because a big chunk of I think the frustration and stress that people who work in food safety and quality and other fields like that is that very fact that they think the technical aspects of what they do are all that's required.
Yeah.
And you talk about it, I talk about it. More and more people are talking about this, which is awesome, is you have to be able to persuade and influence outside of just what you do.
Yeah.
And frankly, that was a mistake, Joel, I made early on in my career. Is I thought
Guilty too.
that if I was just really, really super good at what I did, that was enough. And that senior management would see me and say, "Oh, hey, that Bryan's a real go-getter. I'm gonna hire him and make his career amazing." No. If they knew my name, it was lucky, right? And then plus it almost becomes a trap too, doesn't it? If you're really, really good at what you do and you have 20 different acronyms after your name on your Facebook profile page, you're really good at that, which means what? You're going to stay at that. So part of that is, okay, maybe that's right for you, maybe it's not. But if you want to grow and advance and increase your responsibility and your contribution in your company and to this world, to your point, Jill, you have to be able to grow and learn and influence people outside of what you do.
Absolutely. So Bryan, as we look at getting started, there may be people who have joined us and they're like, who is this Bryan guy?
Yeah.
So, would you even start by sharing a little bit about who you are and how did you get to where you are today?
Well,
and why are you here talking about persuasion with us today?
Yeah, absolutely. What the heck? Well, part of it, and I think it's funny, is people always chuckle when you bring this up, is how did you end up where you're at? And nobody plans to be where you're. You think when you're a young kid, right? You're in high school or college. My life is planned, and I know exactly how it's going to go. Nope, absolutely not. And like most people, I fell into food. I went to college, got a pre-med degree, decided I didn't want to go to medical school. Came down, I was up in Wyoming, came down to Denver, found a job working at a little medical device company, worked in a clean room for 2 years and decided, wow, this is really awful. And started looking around for something else. And I found a job as a microbiologist at a company here in Colorado called Leprino Foods, which makes mozzarella cheese. And they're huge, by the way. It's kind of one of those large companies that are privately held that you've never heard of. And they're a multi-billion-dollar company now. And pretty much if you're eating a pizza from a store or most places, it's probably Leprino Foods cheese. Mm-hmm. So that's where I started my career in the lab. And kind of referencing what I was saying earlier, I became a really good microbiologist. And I was really fast and the work was always done and everything else. But one day I was looking at a incubation jug for salmonella testing. And I thought to myself, Jill, how many times have I done this test with this particular jug? Thousands of times? Just, do I want to keep doing this over and over again and stay here in the lab? And my answer was no. And so in order to do that, you have to grow. And so I started taking on new opportunities in the company, became a technical manager on the whey side of things, kind of doing whey protein and QA stuff and working with the customers and expanding within that company what I did. And then that led to another opportunity with Bond Grain Cheese in Pennsylvania, where I, at a probably too young age of 31 or 32, I became head of quality assurance for a company and never did that before. And oh my goodness, was that a growth curve? So I would imagine a lot of the gray that you're seeing here probably resulted from that period of time. But it was an amazing opportunity. And after that, went to a larger company and became head of quality assurance for North America for Lactalis American Group. So Serrano cheese president, a lot of that. Had the opportunity then to come back to Colorado and went to work at this little known company at the time called White Wave Foods, which was making silk soy milk and Horizon Organic, and they were a division of Dean. Then I eventually so I was head of quality assurance for White Wave and Morningstar Foods, which was another division within that company. Did that for a while, and then I became head of quality for a sugar company, so liquid sucrose, and selling industrial liquid sugar to different manufacturers around the world. Then I went to a company called Boulder Brands, which made gluten-free products and other really good products, and they were purchased. And at that point in time, I decided, it's time for something different, Jill. And I started on my own and became a consultant and wrote, to your point, figuring out the arrow things, right? Wrote this book back here, New Manager Mindset, kind of on my experiences and the lessons I'd learned along the way to help people who are following behind me, hopefully not make my mistakes. And one other thing. So for a period of time, I was also head of training, auditing, and certification for Eurofins North America. So hopefully that's not too long, but that's me in a boring story.
Not boring, but you've certainly set the stage of why having you here to talk about persuasion makes sense. Because I imagine through each of those roles, and even to move into each of those roles, there was a little bit of persuasion that probably was taking place.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the lessons, Jill, I always taught my quality managers and my team is, okay, fine, I'm VP of QA and I have these people who report into me, but that's maybe, if you're really counting, people at the plants and everything else and indirect relationships, I directly controlled maybe 5% of the employment at that company. That meant that 95% didn't report to me, which means I had to utilize persuasion, influence, and working with those groups to get things done in the company, right? I couldn't just simply, go and tell them to do it. They had to see why they needed to do it.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Elaine. I appreciate that.
I know it is a good book. So if you don't have a copy, make sure you jump in. Like Bryan, maybe your website, or even I think I got mine on Amazon.
Yep, Amazon's the best way to do it.
Perfect. Yep, grab a copy because it is a good read. It flows really well, and there are insights and nuggets of wisdom along the way. So Bryan, as you talk about that, it makes me think about even as how we started, where, originally when I came into the industry too, I thought this is all like moving up the ladder or gaining more, making more contributions and helping bigger spaces in food safety and quality meant that I needed to really improve and increase my technical skills. Mm-hmm. Of course, that worked for a while, and then till it didn't. And I'm curious, even as you've gone through, all these experiences, like what are the parts that, and I'm going to kind of use our technical people as kind of our group that we're talking about or focusing on, but like, what are the things that we typically miss when it comes to transferring all of this technical knowledge into things that are valuable for our organizations and that help give us maybe even innovation and, leading competitive edges and enable more business growth? Like, what are the parts that we seem to be missing to get to that next stage?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a great question, because I think a big chunk of this and what we're missing is in some ways hardwired into who we are, because I'm an analytical person and I'm introverted, right? Do I want to walk around the office in the morning and talk with people? No, right? My mindset for the longest time was, okay, I'm here to work. I'm here to get things done. I don't, all this other hooey bluey stuff, that's not for me. That's for those other guys. And that can really hurt you. Because part of this is, and this is a key part, is building those relationships and understanding what other people need. And the important part of that is everybody that you're working with in that company has things that they need to do too. And a big focus on this, and I think this is probably, something you need to underline for our talk here today, is it's not about what you want, it's about what they want, right? Yeah. So how can you help them get what they're after? And guess what? They're going to help you get what you're after, right? So you need to think in those terms.
As you talk about that, I wonder, did you have any like pivotal moments where you're like, that, like the light bulb comes on, you're like, aha, this situation or this example really kind of stands out to you with like, this is when I really, really understood that this part was important?
I think it was, so for me, it's more of a journey, and I think a lot of this, right? And so you're like me, Joel, and as we can see, right, the collection of books you have behind you, and so I'm always reading books too. And so one of the things as we were preparing for this, and so I'll do the gradual. So this book, super good book, and so Secrets of Power Persuasion by Roger Dawson, and this book for me was really pivotal.
Mm.
And I read through this book and I started going through this and it was like, right. It's like, wow, I'm doing everything wrong from these aspects. I'm expecting people to come to me. I'm expecting them to do stuff for me. I'm like, no, that's not how it works. And it was more of a gradual process, right? It wasn't for me just this massive light bulb that went out. I started playing with different things. And one of the things I did early on is I got really good at buying cars because I was studying salespeople and the tools that they would use, Jill, to influence you and the things that they would do. And that's I think part of our theme here for the talk here today is you don't have to do this stuff. You need to be aware of this stuff. So if somebody's doing it to you, you can say, oh, okay, I know what he's doing, right? We're all familiar with good cop, bad cop, right? It's like, okay, I no matter what. And I tried this one time with my wife at a car dealership. There was a car I was interested in. I'm like, okay, we're going to do good cop, bad cop, Beverly. And she's like, okay, I'm like, what do you want me to do? Okay, I'm going to look at these cars and whatever I ask you, you hate. If I say I like this blue color, you're going to say I hate it. If you say if I say I love this truck, you're going to say I hate it. She's like, okay. So we went into the dealership and there was a particular car I was interested in looking at. And the salesperson came up. He was very nice and we're talking. And he's like, well, how do you like this color? And I'm like, well, I like it. What do you think, Beverly? And she goes, oh, I like it too.
You're like, we're off right from the start.
I was like, no, right? So after we left the dealership, she's like, never make me do that again. I'm like, okay, that's fair. But what's interesting is these techniques that salespeople use, and we can apply this information to what we do. In that, so for example, when a car salesperson says to you, Jill, if you were to get this car, would you like this car's interior in leather or cloth? All right, and you start thinking about it. I always like leather, and leather's nice. What are they doing? They're getting you to think past the sale.
Yeah, right? It's not a yes or no. It's a pick the part.
Yes. So now you're already thinking, oh gosh, you can see yourself in the car and you can see yourself driving. They're painting a picture. And if it's a convertible, oh, Jill, wouldn't it be wonderful, nice fall day in Minnesota and you're driving down the road, going to your cabin and the wind is blowing in your hair and everything is just perfect, isn't that? And you're going, yeah, right? You're becoming emotionally attached to that car, right? And here's the weird little secret that in what we do in technical fields that most people don't think about. And you're going to resist this when I say it, but it's absolutely true. We make up our mind and then we use facts to justify it.
Yeah, and I'm not going to dispute you on that, right? Because we've already done so much of the research and we've looked at things and we've spent all this time that nobody else has any, they don't have any knowledge that we've done that. And then we just show up and we're like, based on all of this, here's what you need.
Yes. So through this process, through how you're looking at things and how you're evaluating things and how other people are moving you toward influencing you in those particular areas, all of these different tools are being used all the time. Another good one is time. So that's a tool that people will use. And so children, right? I'm sure you see this with your children, is they will wait till the last minute to tell you something. Friday afternoon, they're heading out the door. Oh, hey, Mom, I forgot to tell you, we're hosting the hockey team and I need $200 worth of snacks. Bye. Right. And you're just like, what? Right.
What just happened here?
And right now you're stuck with going out and buying all the snacks. Whereas if your child had come to you maybe the day before, it'd be like, whoa, hold on a minute here. Tell me more about this. This wasn't planned. It's not my turn in the rotation. Tell me more about why you need this from me. Right. Yeah. But by putting you under time pressure, they have a much more likely outcome of getting what they want. And kids are masters at that.
They can. And I can see too, where that would even create resistance on the receiver end. So I think about times we've, let's say we're putting a new process or we need a new form used. So we walk out, and we're like, you need to start using this one today.
Yeah.
And people are like, whoa, what? So time can be helpful, but it can also, like, when you think of it from that standpoint, can also be one of the resistance points as well, where once again, we haven't necessarily brought people in early so they can start getting used to this idea before we're like, here's the present I have for you. And they're like, no present.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that kind of goes into what Roger Dawson calls the 8 magic keys of persuasion.
Mm.
And the first one is people can be persuaded if you think you can reward them. Right. So the easiest example is if you have direct reports, right? You have a whole lot of influence over those people because you can directly reward them, and they know that. You can give them a good shift to work on. You can give them a bonus at the end of the year. You can give them a good evaluation. And that perception and that relationship between there is an important dynamic, and one of the first ones that we are going to talk about here.
It is. And, and I think it's fascinating to think about. Once again, I'll kind of like probably add in the other side. We've all seen leaders who really don't have that authority. And so when they are looking to influence, that isn't one of the levers that they can pull. No. They have to lean into some of these other persuasion and influence methods, because the reality is they're not going to be able to perhaps get a raise, get a bonus, some of these other things that maybe will help people because of our position or our title.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And part of the disadvantage of that as well is it only works so long, right? You give somebody a nice raise, congratulations, we really appreciate it. Here's a nice raise for you for next year. Hey, oh, wonderful. Awesome. Thank you, Jill. Okay. Right. That the person gets used to that very quickly. And if you're not careful and you rely on that as your only tool of persuasion, people then become to expect it, right? And then it becomes a bad situation, because then in their mind, it's like, well, I'm not going to do this unless you give me something.
Yeah. And the reality is that feels very transactional.
Yes.
And transaction is a method of influence, right? I give you this, you get that. But the part about that, like you said, is it's not something that's typically sustainable over time. Mm-hmm. When you're thinking about like, how do I win people over? That one is really a limited use.
Right. And we're kind of starting off with very low tier persuasion. And so part of this, and then there's also the flip side of this. So let's say that you're a quality manager in a plant and you report into the plant manager. Now you are on the receiving end of that, and you have the perception that plant manager can punish you. Now, part of that is just being aware of that, right? So part of the power around some of these techniques is awareness. If you were aware what that car salesman is doing, it's like, oh, good cop, bad cop. Yeah, whatever. Oh, hey, let me go check with my sales manager on this price. This is really good. I don't know if he's going to take it. Yeah, okay, whatever, right? You're going to go have a cup of coffee and come back, right? Part of being effective in these things is knowing about them and being able to diffuse them. And a lot of times just being aware internally of that dynamic, of that reward and the punishment side of things, and how those are being used all the time, can really help you break out of those patterns and realize how they're controlling you.
Yeah. I'd say part of what we talk about even in our programs are this relationship related to power, and really looking at it through this lens of like some of these that we talk about, like authority over is power over. It's kind of this the traditional power move that we think of, which is very different than when we think about these different methods of persuasion. Like, how do we have power with, like power together, or power to, is more empowerment to people, hence empowerment.
Yeah.
But I think as we think about these different areas, that's part of what we're also navigating is the perception of power that we have and that the other person has as well, real or perceived, and how that actually helps persuade or influence the outcomes that you're hoping to see. And I think even as you say that, when we have these authority ones where people have power over, that just feels a lot different than when it's like we're doing this together and it's power with and power to.
Exactly. Well, and part of this is observation, is look around. And part of this in the company is your title and your position doesn't automatically grant this to you.
No.
Because we know lots of ineffective vice presidents who have no power. Right? They've given it away. Conversely, there's people who are in your company. I'm sure everybody on our chat here today can name people right away. Is people who have no authority but have incredible influence in the organization, right? The classic example I always like on this is the old Army movies, where the general had very little influence. The actual person who influenced thing was the sergeant who was in charge of the supply chain, because he had all the goodies, right? So if you wanted something, you had to go to that sergeant and do a little bit of horse trading and switch some candy bars for cigars or whatever, and they would do a favor for you. And the kind of the joke on those old movies was that that's how the army really worked, right? It was that type of thing. I think, who was it? I forget who the general was. It might have been General Sherman all that way back, but said an army moves on its stomach, and the stomach that's what's in charge, right? And that's
they're rewarding them, right?
Exactly. Now, if you really want to be influential and powerful using these techniques, we all know this term, Jill, carrot and stick, right? Mm-hmm. So with children, if you clean your room, I will give you this. Right. And also in that statement, sometimes implied, sometimes directly, is if you don't do that, here's what I'm going to do. Right. You're not going to go to the hockey game. You're not going to be able to go out with your friends to the movie tonight. Right. So combining the two from a persuasion standpoint is very powerful.
Mm-hmm. Very much so. Well, and I wonder, as we even think about food industry professionals, like what are some of those barriers? Like, is it this that we try to lead more with authority and data, because those we see kind of hand in hand. Yeah. So when you talk about like even giving away our power, like how does that flow through from your experience, and how do you recommend people even overcome that? You've mentioned a few times it's a learned thing, but how do they take those steps to go past that?
Well, here's another example, is that people always think they're in the weaker position. So you're buying a house. Oh gosh, this is a beautiful house. This is absolutely perfect. It's in the right school district. My family loves it. Price is a little high. Maybe if I just come down a little bit, the seller will sell it. But geez, right. And you feel very weak in that position. And the realtor is going, oh, you better buy this. You better get this right. Putting pressure on you on that side as well. The seller, you don't know the seller's situation. Maybe the seller has to sell. Maybe there's a new job waiting in Chicago that they need to get to next week. And they're saying to themselves, oh gosh, I really like this buyer. They seem really nice. And I hope my house isn't priced too high, and I hope they can buy, right? You automatically always think you're in the weaker position. And again, it kind of goes back to an awareness of that. So even sometimes, Jill, I think thinking about this and realizing that both sides have this illusion, that it's very, very helpful. So
yeah,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'd say I can see that where, I think sometimes we get excited as food safety professionals. We're like, wow, we have this really great solution. And we've already created a story sometimes about like how it won't be perhaps embraced, how it won't be considered, how it won't be funded. I think you're right on when it comes to, we've already created this story about how we think someone's going to respond. And we really haven't given them the benefit of the doubt to say, they may be like, I'm so glad. Yes. Like, this is the best thing. And we so needed this. Thank you for bringing it forward. Mm-hmm. But let's talk about some of the details.
Yeah, well, here's some examples that I was thinking of where we feel this as quality managers. FDA shows up for an unannounced audit. Right? Oh my goodness, right? And FDA walks in and they're right. And you think that you're very powerless in that situation. Are you? Right? You need to understand that they may be thinking about this completely different. That investigator may be coming in and saying, oh geez, I'm behind on my work, and my district director is angry with me because I haven't gotten my reports done for last week, and I hope this all goes smoothly, and I need to get this report. You don't know. And so that's why you always need to look at these situations from that standpoint. And that's why you need to think of yourselves in those situations as having equal power, right? And in those situations, you may not think it, but you do. And you need to set those situations up in such a way. FDA understands that there's certain things that they can do and not do. And they're going to push sometimes those envelopes. So for example, let's say no photography. Does FDA have the authority to take pictures in your plant? No, right? Most food lawyers would say no, they do not. They're piggy banking on OSHA and requirements in OSHA and saying that applies to them as well. It's debatable. What is your position on that? How do you explain that to FDA? Critical. And you need to think about these things in advance and How are you going to persuade FDA that that's not necessary?
Yeah. And I think that's a side note. Like if you don't have kind of like a, like a protocol on that, like an SOP on how you do that, like you might want to consider that.
Yes.
That will lay everything out on how that flows for you.
Oh, absolutely. You have to plan all of these things. Right?
Yeah. Which I know you've done episodes on that. So check out the library on that.
And it kind of goes back to setting the stage. And I forget what percentage of it is, Jill, that you may know better than I do. A massive amount, 70 or 80% of the information we gather about other people is nonverbal.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. So if you're the FDA investigator, to continue that scenario, and you come in and set up in the conference room, and I'm the quality manager, and I come in like this. Okay. Yeah, I guess you're here to close us down. You want to see some stuff, right? That's trouble, right? You're deferring, and you're giving up your power in those situations. And now FDA is going, oh, okay, great. I'm gonna run this, right? I want to see this and this and this and this and this and this. Yes, sir. Right. And bad spot to be in.
But persuasion even comes to how people perceive us. Somebody the other day, and I wish I could remember who, said very clearly, like when we think, gosh, somebody already has this story about us, it's because we've provided them with that information one way or another. Yes. And so when we think about, we would like that to shift. So if we'd like to shift how people are perceiving the food safety quality team, or how they're perceiving me interacting or collaborating, like I've given them information that makes them have some perception. So how do I persuade them by providing different information
good
to get
question.
What I need?
Well, I think part of
what you just presented with this FDA thing. Like if you come in like this, they already have you've already given them information. But if you come in,
agree.
Like, hi, glad you're here. How can we work on this together today?
Exactly. And that demeanor is huge. And part of this is I think this goes back to our ancient roots, right? We didn't have a whole lot of time when you're, living in a cave and tigers and all kinds of crazy things are trying to kill you, to make these evaluations. And this applied to other human tribes as well, right? So another human tribe enters your territory, you got to figure out pretty quickly whether they're a friend or a foe. And so we're very good at making quick decisions. And a lot of times then that snap evaluation of you stays. And especially the farther you go up in the company, where they have less contact with you. They don't know you, right? They may have a first impression when they first met you, when they got a tour. And that's all the VP knows of you. And so what is that? So you need to be careful on how you manage those things. A great tool, and I think a lot of times technical people, Jill, will kind of pull back a little bit on this, and I know I do, is bonding is an incredibly powerful tool to help people see other aspects of you. Going together as a team for a paintball outing, or
so important,
bowling, or things like just getting together and seeing people outside of that environment and getting to know them and bonding with them. And oh God, remember that when we were playing the paintball and I shot you in the back of the head when you were laughing? Oh yeah, those type of things make a huge difference, because part of it too is it helps break down that hierarchy. Because if you're the VP and you're out there with your team doing these activities, you're not the VP anymore, right? You're Bryan, right?
Yeah.
And
it makes a big difference. And let's say, I know some people are like, gosh, it's hard for us to all get together outside of work. You can still do things at work. What if you have like a trivia contest day, or I don't know, pick something that you can do even in the office that is different than your normal routine.
Yeah.
Because that gets people a little outside their comfort zone when you invite them into a different space and make that okay.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, you get to see these other sides of people, which is really helpful as we think about creating these relationships that help us get work done. It's about how do we get work done together.
Right. And so you reminded me of, so there was a plant manager I knew earlier in my career. Fantastic plant manager. He was so good that if a plant was struggling, they would send him to that plant to turn it around. He was just an amazing people person, right? And I remember one of the things that he did is at this one particular plant, the safety rating, not so good, right? They were having some OSHA issues and near misses and not good. And so he got everybody together and had some group meetings. He's like, okay, we need to turn this around. We need to do a better job at safety. We're going to do some trainings and things like this. And guess what? in 3 months, if we reduce our reportables by X amount, I'm going to run through the plant in a Batman suit. He ran
Okay.
through the plant in a Batman suit. He had the cape behind him and he's running around. Right? Did that diminish his authority? Absolutely not. Right? He was rewarding his team, carrot and stick. Right? He was persuading them, and he was doing it in a fun way that allowed him to bond with his team. Did the people who worked in that plant talk about that for years to come? Oh yeah, they did. Right? Fantastic people skills.
Yeah. And I think, like you pointed out earlier, like letting people see more than one side of you. I think, especially in food safety quality, I'm going to pick on our audience, and it's on me too, right? Yeah. Because we lead with our technical part, we can sometimes come across perhaps a little bit, one-dimensional. We know each one of you out there have many, many dimensions that all make up this fantastic whole being that you are. And so when we are comfortable and able to share some of those with others, it just creates more opportunity for, like you said, that type of bonding to happen. Yeah. It's like that peek under the hood, who are you? What is this? There's all these parts. Mm-hmm. Share some of them.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that this is a commonality I noticed with good plant managers kind of on this theme, is no matter how big the plant is, they know the name of every person in that plant. They know their spouse, they know their kids, they know what they do. And man, you talk about building a cohesive team. When you see the plant manager walking around and saying, "Hey, Bill, how you doing? How's your son doing? How did you do on the hockey game last weekend? Oh, it's too bad. They'll get him next time." Right? And doing it in a genuine way where people know that you have taken the time to learn about them and care about them, they'll do anything for you at that point.
That in itself is part of one of these like persuasion methods. And it's not the swarmy kind, the you salesman kind. It's the genuine care so we can have success together. That's what persuasion and influence are about. Like, how do we have better success together?
Yes. Mm-hmm. And part of this too is being magnanimous. And sometimes people have to do things for you and they have no choice, and you got them over a barrel. Be nice about it, right? Yeah. Be like, hey, listen, I know this is kind of a crappy situation and you got to do this and stuff like that, but let's just get through this, and let me see what I can do to help you, right? Don't lord over them and make yeah, right? People remember that stuff, right? So would you rather remember as being generous or being difficult?
Yeah, it goes back to that, like, we're here together. It's the power with, we're together versus power over.
Yes.
And that leaves a whole different impression for the people that you are, in the space with.
Mm-hmm. Now, here's a positive one, because we've been talking kind of, oh, don't do this, don't do that. But here's a great one for technical people joining us today, is expertise power is huge. We see it all the time. COVID, right? Oh my goodness, right? If the government or whoever was doing a press release wanted to persuade people in a particular area, they would bring out doctors. Right? They wouldn't bring out statisticians or epidemiologists. They would bring out doctors, and they would have their lab coats on, and they would go to, they would have the press conference. Why? Right? That's prestige. That's prestige persuasion, right? 2 out of 3 doctors agree. Right?
Yeah. Well, and we see that in our companies, right? Maybe when we have a customer who's unhappy with, a process we're doing or product, or right, there'll be some immediate actions that perhaps like the sales team or ops will kind of work on. But when they need someone to kind of like help with that authority of like, this is okay, they usually call in the food safety quality person to say, tell us the technical side of this.
Right. And in those situations, you have persuasion.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is. And so and that is part of why organizations hire us, because we do have that. So it's not just that we have the technical knowledge, but we are able to convey that value to others. And so that's part of our role, is like, I think like you had said earlier, there are times, and everyone has a place and has different things that they need out of this life. And so if yours is like, I'm just going to generate the data and I'm over here, that's cool. But like, you could think too about like, well, how do I help someone who maybe has to go to that next step? Or if I do want to step into that arena, what would that look like for me to kind of tiptoe over? And do I want to?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you see this as well, right? When we go to conferences and speak at conferences, instantly you have prestige and expertise with that audience, right? Number one, you're up on a stage talking authoritatively about these different type of things. And 9 times out of 10, what happens after you're done speaking is, 5 to 10 people will come up to you afterwards and talk with you. They want to learn more. They want to understand. They've got a great deal of respect for you doing that. And in those situations, you have a great deal of persuasion and authority.
There is. And, that's part of, once again, what people, their perception of us and like how we can help and collaborate. We once had a client who, was a PhD and very respected in the field and with a great company. But one thing is that they held back. Being an introvert, when they were in meetings, they would hold back on, giving their opinion or, kind of like giving a summary of information or data because they're like, well, it's all here. To them, it was very logical. And what we worked on was, if you're looking to bring people in and influence and collaborate differently, like how do you show up a little bit differently? Like you've got the creds already. It's just allowing people to see this other side that confirms for them that you do and that you're approachable and that you're human. Yeah. And it was fantastic to see just how people started noticing that. And literally, like up the chain, people started giving feedback to their manager and their manager's manager about this shift that they saw and how that made a difference in how they trusted them. So 100%. It really does help. And it is scary to step outside our comfort zone. But if what we want is over there on the other side, right, then we have to step into something new to be able to help make a bigger impact, to help shift where we are to where we see it can be.
Right. And so using that expertise. So the example I use on this is like your quality report in your company. So you put together all the information, your complaint rates and your defects and corrective actions and whatever else, and you put together a nice report and you send it out. A lot of times technical people think, well, that's okay, I'm done. Right?
Done. I did my part.
Yeah, people will read that report and they'll see what I see and they'll know that we need to take action. Anybody still think that's true? No. Are they going to read it? Maybe, right? Who knows, right? Your job, and this is where utilizing that persuasive technical mantle that you have is explaining to people why that's important. Right? So having a meeting to go over the quality reports is critical. And what I learned, especially with senior management and those type of avenues, is that when you sit down to meet with the senior leadership team to go over the quality report, it never goes the way you think. And that used to confuse me because I'm like, okay, well, we're here to talk about complaints and things like that. But what would happen during the meetings a lot of times, Jill, would be the CFO was mad at the VP of Ops. And then so something in the report, the CFO would use that to snipe at the VP of Ops. Said, well, we'd have better financials if you guys got this under control, or something like that. And then they would start kind of going back and forth. And I'd be like, I'd be sitting there watching this, right? And pretty soon the meeting's up and I'm out of there. They're people. Right?
They're people.
They're people. They have things that they're focused on. So part of it is you have to understand those things and be able to pivot and flex with what they're concerned about. Again, right back to what we're talking about. It's not about you, it's about them.
Yeah.
So what is the information that they need? It's not the how, right? It's not the data, it's why. Why is this important, right? So I would go into these meetings and be like, okay, complaints are trending up a little bit over the past 3 months, and I'm concerned about that, and here's why. Right? Now they're going to listen to you, right? They're going to have the report, right? Maybe they're looking at the report, but they're listening to you, right? They're interested in your opinion as the expert, and that's when you gain influence in those groups.
Yeah, I think that's a great example of how we can still be the technical expert, but we very much link it to what the business needs or what's the risk to the business, what enables the business, and then help facilitate the next level of conversation because they are all linked together. But we also have to help make those connections for people to see where they fit in. So when we're like, oh my gosh, we never get funding for this.
Right.
it can be a challenge, but how do we pull those in to say this affects this versus this, and that's how it impacts the business? If we can make it about the business, it helps tie things together.
Yes. And so in that same vein of thought, very important in quality to change your focus from backwards looking to forwards looking.
Mm.
So what do I mean by that?
Yeah.
We're really good at creating reports for what happened last month. Okay, great. Who cares? Right? That was last month. It's already done. It's gone. It's in the book.
What's that persuading anyone to do? Not much.
Right. You need to think about the future. It is, okay, well, I have this data. What's the trending showing me? What's the information? What do we need to be looking out for? What are the things that I'm worried about, right? And so you can already hear in the language I'm using with that, Jill, it's more emotion based, right? It's not, last month our complaint rate was 5.72 complaints per million pounds. Okay. Good, bad? I don't know, right? Doesn't matter. Better is, okay, complaints have been trending down. Great information. I think we're doing a wonderful job in the plants. We've really done some fantastic root cause and corrective action out at the plant at this location. What we're going to be doing next month in relation to this is this. When the sales group gets together, they talk about forecasts, right? What do we think we're going to do next quarter? What's the budget going to be next quarter? You need to think like that too.
Yeah, it helps to think ahead on what we can do together versus focusing on like, here's where we were.
Right.
Because that's already done. We're not changing any of that. So forward. Yeah.
And never be the I told you so guy, right? That's not going to get you anywhere. Right?
Not really. You know, I have very few situations where that's actually been helpful. No. But I think, you know, woven in there was something that I think is very helpful for people to consider when you think about persuading and influencing. That even though data may be a good story to show where you think things should go, at the end of the day, people do make decisions emotional based. Like 90% of decisions are based upon emotion. And I know you may go, that makes no sense. If the data is so clear, then that's the way we go. The answer may be yes, because my emotion fits with this story and it's easier for me to say yes. Yeah. You know, Bryan, when you brought up COVID earlier, I mean, we definitely all saw where there were times where data showed this and other people were like, no, because emotionally they weren't there yet. Right. And so we definitely know that emotion is where people will go. And so the more we can also tie that in and think about how that plays into our collaborating, our persuading, our influencing, I think you put it best. Like, how do we help people go where they want to go? That's emotion. We like going these places because it's success, it's progress, it feels good. Like we all like to win. How do we connect these things together to make it easier for people to be like a yes? Even if it's a yes with questions or questions and then a yes, but it keeps that conversation open versus a no. Exactly. And so a big key, and this is the eighth key that Roger Dawson talks about for persuasion, is consistency. And in quality, that's extremely important. One of the hallmarks and things that I looked at in my career for how successful I was doing with my own internal measures was consistency. And the way I would phrase this with my teams was, you should be able to come to me with a problem, explain the problem, how you want to resolve the problem, and know what I'm going to say in advance. And that's really hard to get to, right? So you want people thinking in terms of, okay, well, how's Bryan going to think about this? Oh, okay, yeah, we're going to have to put this on hold. We're going to have to do this and bracket this, and probably going to have to look at some suppliers, you know, for ingredient testing and whatever else. And having them put together the plan and then coming to me to validate that and say, yeah, that's great. Exactly right. People crave consistency. They want to see that in their leadership. They want to know that every day I'm going to be approaching things in that same manner. We all know people, to your point, Jill, around emotions, right? People who are in a bad mood one day and they're in a great mood the next day, and you never quite know what you're going to get with them. That kind of is off-putting because you're kind of like, right? Okay, when I put my head in the office, is he going to yell at me or wave at me? Yeah, that takes more mental and emotional energy from the people around you to figure out what that means and how to act. And going back to even what you talked about earlier with our fight or flight, right? Our brains are always scanning for the consistency to know, do I have a risk here that I hadn't considered? And so when we have unpredictable behaviors and unknowns, once again, that makes it harder for people to say yes, because they're like, well, I don't know what happens next. I'm already so off here. And so the more we can help guide by being consistent in how we approach things. And it doesn't mean that we can't have innovation in what we're doing and being curious and exploring. But how do we demonstrate that through so that people know, like, that's still part of us showing up consistently?
Yes. And if you work for me and you're not sure coming into my office with bad news how I'm going to react, that's a very uncomfortable place to be. And back to your point, Jill, with human nature, you're probably internally thinking about, consciously or subconsciously, how do I avoid that conversation when that conversation needs to take place?
Yeah.
And being in that role then of being consistent, and essentially in those situations, looking at it like Mr. Spock or something from Star Trek, right? It's like, okay, well, all right, thank you for bringing this. Let's dig into this and figure out what we're going to do, right? And so you have to be very choiceful in your words in those situations, and approaching it that way. One of the things I always taught my teams was, and this is extremely important in quality assurance and food safety, is if you panic, everybody panics. So if there's a bad situation that's happening, you need to be the center of the storm. You need to be the person that's saying, okay, yeah, this is not good, but here's what we're going to do. Here's the steps. I need you to do this. I need you to do that, right? And the person who can do that, right? Once again, we're calling upon expertise persuasion, right? So, okay, Brian's the technical guy. He knows what's going on. Okay, right. You need people in those situations to take direction and execute quickly. And you only do that by building out this skill set we're talking about right now.
Yeah. And, this is, I think, a very timely conversation about this different skill set and how it is a learned behavior, how it is a learned skill set. It is part of muscle memory. It's part of trying different things as well. Especially as we think about, we've had some really big recalls lately, and there's still lots of questions. So my goal here isn't to be like, wow, that's great or that's bad. But it also gives us pause to think about as professionals in the food industry, like, what is that? Like, how do we respond? And what are things that we can all do different in our roles to help prevent these things from happening? And I don't mean just, well, gosh, if they would have just given us the money. How do I persuade people? How do I influence more? How do I'm guilty. In my early career, I'd be like, well, I told you, I sent it in an email. My responsibility is done.
Yep.
I look back on that now and I think, gosh, I was so immature.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that in a bad way. There are many people that still maybe experience that. And I have moments too, where I still experience it in different spaces. But I also have to think about, like, what would happen when I stepped fully into that ownership and really worked on persuading and influencing people to do things a little bit differently. And that's hard. I get it. That is hard. It can be hard.
Right. People have a tendency to think that things will continue the way they're going in perpetuity, right? Things don't change, right? And we hear it in this phrase that I hate, which is, we've never had a problem before. There's an assumption that, okay, well, we've gotten away with it in the past. We're good enough. We are not going to have a problem in the future. You have to break through that. And one of the phrases I've used recently relative to that is, no one thinks they're going to have a recall until they do.
Yeah.
And then everybody says the same thing, don't they, Jill? They say, oh my God, oh, how did this happen? Why did this happen to us? Well,
and this is kind of that foundation of food safety culture. And when we talk about, like, how could that happen in that culture? Well, culture takes every single person who's committed to shift something in their behavior. Doesn't mean we have to all do it the same. We don't all have the same thing that needs to shift to have better outcomes. But it does require every single one of us to do something different.
Right.
So,
and yeah, really, I mean, and this gets back to, I think, really one of the main themes of our talk here today, is that persuasion is important for us because that is setting the tone for where you work, for the entire plant, the entire company, whatever, so that people understand that these things are important and this is how we make product, right? It's food safety culture. It's not food safety documents, right? The food safety policy on the wall doesn't change anything, right? It's the behaviors that change, and your consistent actions, your support of those activities, and then building that out outside of the quality group. If you're the leader in quality in your application, and everybody's a leader in those aspects, how do I build this outside of my group so that other people understand why this is so important for our success? Because it's critical. Dr. DeFeo from the Duran Institute said this to me a while back, and I'm like, that's really good. Is we often hear, and this is something that we fight against, is, well, qualities cost money and all these type of things, which is total BS. He said, okay, well, if you believe that, tell you what, send your quality group home for a week and see what happens. We're critical. We are absolutely critical to making good products and making product that make people happy. And we need to be ambassadors outside of our function to make sure that everybody else understands that too.
We do. We do. Right. That's how we continue to add value, how we set people up for success, and how we have better outcomes together.
Yep. And if you need to run around in a Batman outfit to do it, well, maybe you need to do it.
Our slogan is be the catalyst. So be the one to help make the change.
Absolutely. People look to you. You are, because of that expertise that you have and that prestige that you have in your role, people look to you. Absolutely.
Yes. And Bryan, I know we can talk about this more. Like there is still so much here that we haven't even touched on or uncovered. And so I'm really happy that we're going to continue this conversation on Friday.
Yes, I think this is the first two-parter that I've been involved with. And for the food safety chat on Friday, Jill and I are going to continue this conversation. And as a teaser, we're going to kind of look at the 8 keys that we were just talking about. That's just kind of scratching the surface on this topic. And this is kind of one of those things you can learn for your entire life and still not be a master of it. But we're going to dive in on the next show, the 4 stages of persuasion, techniques you can use for effective persuasion, understanding motivations of other people, overcoming resistance, and charisma and rapport.
See, it's going to be another great show with a slightly different focus, but all of these pull into how we lead in this space. How we take care of each other, how we have an impact. And so be sure to tune in on Friday for Bryan's Food Safety Chat. It's at 9 a.m. Central, which is, 7 Mountain.
Oh, no, we're on an hour. So 8 a.m. Mountain, 10 a.m. Eastern.
I'm always off on time zones. Tia's going to watch this and she's laughing at me right now. Not my superpower.
Yep. And so, we'll continue this conversation. And so, I mean, part of this, and this is what I love, getting back to your comments here at the beginning of our talk here today, Jill, is, we're all working in this together, and we're all on the same page, and we're all promoting this. And this is why it's absolutely fantastic. And I love that, the sharing of information through these different platforms that's out there now is just excellent. And the information you're sharing with Tia, world-class. So thank you very much for what you're doing.
Hey, you know what? Thank you. It takes a village, which is why we're here, right? There is enough room and space for all of us, and we need all of us. So kudos to everybody out there, like doing the hard work every day. We're getting there one step at a time. And if you're thinking, you know what, I'd like to get there more than just one step at a time. Well, guess what? We have cohorts starting in January for our technical leader boot camp. And February is our strategic leader for leaders of leaders. And March is our integrated leader, which is leading functions in the organization. So if you're thinking, I have some leftover dollars in my development budget for 2024, let's make those have a huge ROI for you next year. So go on out to our website at www.foodsafetykatalyst.com and check out what's there, because we can help you find the right program to help you really make the impact that you want to have.
Awesome.
So, well, Bryan, thank you so much for being here. Can't wait till Friday. Thank you to our audience for joining us. And of course, tune in on Friday as well and join the conversation there. But until then, we'll be back here next week, same time, same place. And we hope you have a great week.
Great. Thanks for having me on, Jill.
It was our pleasure. All right. Bye-bye, everyone.